Hello aviators, welcome back to the Finer Points. Well my friends, it seems as though if you ask, you shall receive. In the last video we were discussing what we call the first leg of the traffic pattern. Is that the upwind or is that the departure leg? And we realized we needed some guidance from the FAA on this, and sure enough, June 6th of this year, literally while I was putting together the last video, that guidance came in the form of 90-66 Charlie. That's Advisory Circular AC 90-66 Charlie. Let's see what it says.
Hello aviators, my name is Jason Miller, a full-time career flight instructor. On the Finer Points channel, you can join me as I bring you tips and tricks that I've learned from 20 years on the flight line.
All right, so here's what we got. The FAA published a new version of Advisory Circular 90-66. This new version is Charlie. So it's 90-66 Charlie. And I'll make the whole long story short, and then we'll talk about the details just in case you can't hang in here on this video. But the bottom line is, we are going to call the upwind if you're staying in the traffic pattern, or if you're operating on the opposite side of the traffic pattern from the downwind. Either thing is the upwind. If you are leaving the area, and only if you are taking off and leaving the area, should you call this the departure leg. That's essentially what the document says. Now let's dive into this a little bit. All right, for those of you that missed the last video, the controversy is essentially this. A lot of us call that first leg of the traffic pattern after liftoff and the extended center line of the runway, we call that the upwind. Most of us have always called that the upwind, and it feels as though this idea that it's called the departure leg is a relatively new thing. But sure enough, the FAA texts, most of them today, the Airplane Flying Handbook, the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, and the AIM, all label this the departure leg. So they label the upwind as something opposite the downwind on what we would call the dead side of the pattern. Apologies to helicopter pilots, it's not really dead. Okay, sometimes there's helicopters over there or gliders over there, so use caution. But it's not the side on which fixed-wing aircraft are operating, fixed-wing powered aircraft are operating. So whatever that dead side of the pattern is, you would call the path parallel to the runway in the direction of landing, and opposite the downwind, you'd call that the upwind. You look for folks on the upwind here or here, and only use departure leg if you're leaving the traffic area. If you look at the pilot controller glossary, they make no mention at all of any departure leg whatsoever, and air traffic control doesn't typically use that. Just consider what RH from Opposing Bases said in our last interview.
Always heard upwind from an air traffic tower, and that's what I'll continue using. I won't say extend your departure leg.
Now the comments on that first video were kind of insane. The community is really divided. Definitely the majority of people are calling it the upwind, but people are really passionate about this, and we don't really agree.
All right, you guys, just looking at some of these comments. One guy says here, departure leg, not upwind. Upwind is when you fly on a go around. Another guy says here, Kiwi06, I am firmly in the upwind camp, right? So that's pretty typical. There's about 800 comments here so far, and that is pretty typical of what we see. Randomonium says, CFI nerd talk. Yawn. Call it whatever you want, just don't swamp the frequency. It is, in fact, CFI Nerd Talk. You are absolutely correct. I think my whole channel is CFI Nerd Talk, actually. Let's see. Philip Mead, 3575. I call it upwind. So there you go. Yeah, boom. Jorge Gonzalez, MZ8RO. If you're staying in the pattern, it's upwind. If you're leaving the airport, it is the departure leg. And that is, in fact, the way the FAA came down in the recent advisory circular. Anyway, this is super interesting. Check these out and leave a comment of your own. I'd love to know what you think.
So we needed some guidance from the top down, and sure enough, we got that guidance in the form of an updated advisory circular. AC 90-66 Charlie specifically addresses this and even uses bold type, right, to really point this out. It says that yes, the upwind is a line parallel to the runway in the direction of landing. So we can imagine that it is still that line opposite the downwind, but it clearly states in bold that it also will be used for takeoff, right after takeoff, and touch and goes, right? So if you're staying in the pattern is the implication there, because, and you only know that when you go down to what they say about the departure, and again in bold, says departure should only be used when leaving the traffic area, which really makes me feel a whole lot better because you'll remember in the first video, I just get concerned, that I think a safety issue is if we hear departure on the frequency, we immediately assume people are leaving, departing the area, departing the pattern, departure procedures. Departure means I'm out of here, right? So clarifying this point is critical. For those folks that are using departure leg and staying in the pattern, you should really consider changing the way you do it. For the rest of us, if it's upwind that you're using, maybe now just consider adopting departure if you're actually leaving the traffic area. So I know I'm going to hear about this in the comments, but we got the guidance we were looking for. And thank you to the FAA for clarifying this point. I will do what I can to use whatever microphones and megaphones I have to get the word out and make sure people know both things are appropriate depending on the situation. All right, you guys, thanks for watching. Definitely leave me a comment. Tell me what you think of this new advisory circular. Also, be sure to check out a free 3-day trial of our ground school app. I get questions all the time on Instagram about how to improve landings, exercises people can do to improve coordination, how do you prep for a check ride. All of that stuff is in the ground school app. You can check it out at learnthefinerpoints.com. Also, consider becoming a patron. Help me keep these videos ad-free. I do weekly office hours there. There's tons of bonus content. You can check out all of that stuff at patreon.com/learntfp. Also, remember that when you renew your AOPA membership, you should select Pilot Protection Services. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, do all that YouTube stuff. I'm Jason Miller. You guys are the best fans on the internet. And until I see you again, be safe and fly your best.